It seems like we can't talk about the Zenless Zone Zero without power creep issue, especially when Mindscape 6 Alanjo is weaker than the Mindscape 0 Miyabi. I personally do think that Mindscape 2 Alanjo should be as comparable as the Mindscape 0 to reach that balance that is acceptable. And to nobody's surprise, Evelyn power creep the Soldier 11, but there are also two other characters that got power creeped by Evelyn that people doesn't really talk about, and I think one characters being able to power creep 3 characters is just outrageous, which is Jane-Do jiggling physics and the Piper's armpit. Well, with that said, I'm not complaining at all. So let's go over with the quick rundown about the Evelyn. So basically Evelyn is like Soldier 11 but with more emphasis on the chain attacks. In terms of power levels, Evelyn without the signature weapon, she's just about as good as the Soldier 11 with Brimstone, which is Soldier 11's Wenjin. But when Evelyn is equipped with her signature Wenjin, you would see about more than 20% differences. So she really is a signature weapon dependent characters. With that said, I still suggest you to pull for Astra before her W engine, as Astra is very synergistic with Evelyn. Even though the damage and the power levels performance seems to be about the same with Soldier 11 without her signature Wenjin, I do think that Evelyn would perform much better than Soldier 11 in the Shiyu defense, because Shiyu defense nature is multi-waves of mobs, and you do need some levels of grouping to clear up the mobs really quickly. And chain attack plus grouping capability of Evelyn could deal with that situation perfectly. And her grouping capability synergizes so well with the stunner. You could just group a mobs together with Evelyn, then you stun the whole groups of mobs with stunner, then you chain attacks with Evelyn, and most of the time you should be able to clear all the trash mob within one chain attacks. Make her a perfect agent for multi-wave scenario, and on top of that, her chain attacks is capable of dealing about more than 50% of damage than any other DPS chain attacks, and about 45% of her own ultimate damage. So it's like releasing half of the ultimate every time when she uses her chain attacks. And I think most of you would know this by now. She could also accumulate her own special attacks, which is the chain attacks by her own, by charging this bar here and hold attacks to get this stack. And the main way to get it is basic attacks, special attacks, and counter with special attacks. And before I get into the tier list, I would like to talk about the differences of playing Evelyn to any other critical DPS like Soldier 11, Harumasa, and Zhu Yuan. You kind of want to stun the enemy with the on-field stunner before you swap into DPS. But in Evelyn's case, she needs to charge her bar and accumulate the stack to save all her self-activated chain attacks in the stun window. So you do want to swap back and forth between Evelyn and the stunner in order to charge up her bar and the stack until her bar and stack is full. Then you could attack the enemy with the stunner until the enemy is stunned. And I think this introduced a really interesting playstyle by swapping back and forth between characters, and it does make the game feels more fun. Now let's get into team tier list. So I took the test result from this JP channel, the Kohei channel, and it comes to nobody's surprise that Lider Astra team is the best team for the Evelyn, because this team simply gives the most amounts of buff and chain attacks. And these 3 units kit just works with each other's kit perfectly well. Like Astra Ultimate could activate the chain attacks for Evelyn, and Lider is a stunner, so he could also provide chain attacks, and he also provide a lot of fire damage buff on top of that, especially with Lider's W engine. Now let's take a look and breaks down how this team is supposed to play. So for the 4 set on Astra Yao, you want to use Wing Jazz because her ultimate would launch the chain attacks, and you should put Astro Voice on the stunner and not the Shock Star. It has been proven by many videos that it is better on Deadly Assault, and I also do think that this is the best setup for the general use. But if you don't want to swap back and forth between the disc, then you could use Wing Jazz on the stunner instead. And these 2 setup also apply to any other stunner like Qing Qingyi, and Koleida. But if you're like into speed running in the Shiyu defense and able to clear mobs within one cycle, then the classic Astro Voice and the Shock Star would give you a second or two faster clear time, which is the same setup for the following gameplay that we are about to see by Kohei Channel. So he got in with Astra and quick assist into Evelyn, then he used Evelyn's skill, which has a really large area to group the mobs together, and swap into Lighter before Astra's special quick assist is out. Then he stunned all the mobs with Lighter skill, then finish off all the mobs with her chain attacks. This is so clean. Now he immediately used normal attacks on the next mobs and hold attack to get the stack. So the main strategy here, you try to accumulate Evelyn's bar by skill and the basic attacks while stunning the enemy as soon as possible by swapping back and forth between Lighter and Evelyn. As you see here, he prioritized parrying over the special quick assist by Astra, even though you would lose attacks buff from the Astro Voice, but the goal here is to stun the enemy as soon as possible. And parrying the mobs would also give you tremendous amounts of ultimate on top of the days you get. So the strategy here is to parry as soon as you see it and keep attacking the enemy with the basic and the skill as soon as you have it. A really simple strategy, but perfectly executed. So he stunned the enemy with the Lighter here, because you never ever want to stun the enemy with Evelyn. You would be losing her chain attacks for nothing. So make sure you pay extra attention before you break the enemy. This is the important part. He cancelled chain attack and swap into Lighter here to deal damage with Lighter's ultimate, because Lighter himself is not only just a stunner but also a DPS, even better than Soldier 11, so it's definitely worth it to use ultimate within stun window. And after Lighter's ultimate, it chain attacks back into Evelyn again, so you got 2 chain attacks on Evelyn within one stun window. So you definitely want to cancel chain attacks every time when you finish chain attacks with Evelyn to get this extra chain attacks. And now he used this self-activated chain attacks and swap cancel into Lighter to squeeze out even more damage. And after Evelyn finished all her animation, he swapped back into Evelyn to use ultimate and finish off the enemy. An insane run by this JP bro. So now let's go over with the tier 0 team. And the second best team is surprisingly Lighter and Lucy. We got 46,000 on this one, and I guess it's because Lucy also provides a lot of impacts on top of her phenomenal amounts of buff. And to nobody's surprise, Caesar Astra Yao is also really amazing. But the actual third best team is actually Astra and Qingyi. But the test is being done on the boss that has the electric resistance, so this team got lower number than the Caesar one. Just keep that in mind. And the tier 0.5 team, we got 41,000 on the Nicole team, standing side by side with the Caesar Lighter team. So it seems like Nicole is the biggest winner after the release of Astra for how synergistic they are. And specifically, the Nicole in this build should have energy regen on this number 6 and use swing jazz forset to dish out even more skill, which is her main sources of defense shred. And moving on to the Bernice team, Bernice and Evelyn doesn't really work well together, even with Astra and Lighter. If you replace Bernice with Lucy in the Astra team, you would get a very similar result. And if you replace Bernice in the Lighter team, as I mentioned earlier, Lucy would perform significantly better than Bernice. And on top of that, these runs were being done with her signature weapon, and with Bernice underperform in so many teams, Infernal Forset on Evelyn is definitely not a viable option anymore, because it needs Bernice abnormally to be effective in the first place, banning the Infernal set into the Shadow Realm. So it's definitely not worth it to put Evelyn and Bernice in the same team. You would get more from Bernice by putting her into other team. Now we get Bernice out of the way, we got Koleida with Astra also getting 40k, and with Lighter is 34,000. It's not because this team is bad, because the stages is highly favorable to the quick assist, so it underperformed due to the stages and not because of the team. But it's definitely decent. But again, Why do you want to use Colada when you could have just used Lucy? And I think the reason behind it is because she's standard characters and she doesn't really provide a lot of buff as compared to Lucy and Lighter. Let's move on to the free-to-play team. And surprisingly, Lucy and Nicole, the two best A-rank support in the game, is doing really well with Evelyn, getting 34k. It even outperformed Lucy and Colada team. And the other really sad scenario that I have to inform you guys is that the Lucy Bernice team with the quick assist buff is performing roughly the same as this Lucy Colada team. So you could have an idea of how bad is Bernice with Evelyn here, and mainly it's because the Evelyn's additional ability is not able to be procs in this team setting. So yeah, like, comment and subscribe if you find this useful, and see ya guys.